Hey everyone, I just wanted to post a video on my sort of concepts related to the golf swing, and then so the main one that I think of whenever I just try and understand, instruction, because I watch quite a bit of it online and then produce a little bit of it based on, things that I'm going through, in my golf swing. The biggest thing is the way I think about the swing is making room. That's the thing that I use in my mind when you have a backswing and then you come through, then the body has to make room, for the arms. That's the way I view it, for them to come through. And then there are lots and lots of different ways to do that, and some better than others. And so that's like my, again, just simple way to boil down, what the body's doing. Obviously, it's very, very complicated in terms of the number of motions and the sequence of those motions and that kind of thing. But to me, ultimately, the body has to make room, for the arms to come through to deliver the club head, in a square way, and then with some amount of power. And so this is also what I want to tie into to something that I've been experimenting with after watching a few videos online that, about driver length, because I've been struggling with my driver, and I'm pretty good with my irons. I wouldn't say I'm a great iron player, but I'm pretty good. And then in my mind, I want to understand like why, because there's a huge discrepancy. It's like my driver would be like really bad, and so that doesn't make sense. Like if somebody came up and told me that like they hit their 6-iron really good, really, really good or whatever, and then they're like, oh, I can't hit my 5-iron. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. It's like, just cut it down so it looks like the 6 or something. That's what you would say. And so that's effectively what I did, as an experiment. And then it's I'm interested, to see how it goes further. But I wanted to also understand, my quote field testing of this idea. And so it didn't make sense, like why my driver was so disproportionately bad. But, I think this might be the first step in understanding it. So when we come through with our arms, our body has to make room. And so the way I view it is that it's always better to make room from the ground up. That's like a principle that I know now. And so you have to clear the hips, and this is even more important with the driver. And so, start with again, with the ground up. And so what oftentimes that I do is I don't even plan to make room. I'm at the top and then I just come down, and then just with my an all arm swing. And so I have a swipey motion, okay? And so coupled with a strong grip, which is what I have, a very strong grip, I would say, then the club face is closed. And so I would hit like these low snap hooks with nothing behind them. And so they're just basically like, you just tee up again. That's how bad they are most of the time. So they're unusable. And so that's a problem, first and foremost. But so in that situation, what I'm doing is quote unquote making room with my shoulders. I'm starting from the top down, okay? And so sometimes what happens when a person doesn't aggressively go to the ball like that is that they may lift up and out. And so then they start using their chest and their upper body to quote unquote make room, okay? And then you're going to get thin shots or just very unpredictable shots, poor strikes, because you're coming up out of it and twisting to make room, for the arms to come through. And so that's another thing, that I see me and lots of people do. All of it ultimately boils down to the room not being created for the arms from the ground up, okay? That's the best way to do it, because when a person does do that, then during that time, when the upper body's not moving, which is connected to the arms, the club can fall. That's the key thing that I've realized now. And so when the club falls, it shallows. And so it gets into this quote unquote slot. And then, then your arms are sort of mute for a while. Obviously the arms are still moving even slightly, but they're not, I would call them, they're changing direction is a better way to put it. And so they're not like accelerating to the ball or anything like that. So that's the biggest advantage ultimately. And so that's what the hip allows. And then the upper body can accelerate through, because the chest and the arms are connected to it and all that. So that's very, very important, and so that's a major understanding that I know now, and explains why my driver is the worst. Because the longer the club gets, physically, the longer the club, the more and more crucial it is to make room from the ground up. Whereas if you have a wedge, even if you muted your lower body, you could still hit a wedge fairly decent just with your arms purely, and just nipping it nicely, and then making good contact, and it's you could still get it out there and get close to your stock number, but you can't with a driver. And so the longer and longer the club gets, the more and more important, the more and more that error is going to be exposed if you're not creating room from the ground up for the arms to come through. And so the next I would say that the backswing is fundamentally important, but to me there's literally an infinite number of ways to do it, but there's only one proper way to make room, for sure, to generate power. And then the next thing is like what you do at impact. When you've made room, how do you complete the swing? And so you could flip at it, some people hold it, and then you could come out of it. You can do a lot of different things, but basically for me, if I don't flip at it, then I have a decent shot. If I hold it a bit too long, I might hit some blocks or whatever. I'm fine with that. For me, I'm a left-handed golfer. I can't have the ball go right ever. I don't even like it a little bit, honestly. But yeah, so that's usually, you can't really control that. That's like psychological. It's like I hit a fairly big sort of kind of draw yesterday, and I knew exactly why I did it, because I saw somebody else in my group and I wanted to hit it past them. And so it was like a psychological thing. So I had a poor pre-shot thought. And so what I did was logical, because I was trying to get that extra little bit out, and that's when the brain kind of like fight or flight just like flips the hands over to try to get that extra little bit, because it knows that a draw is more powerful than a fade or a cut. So I was kind of not like I was happy with the result, because I had to pitch out, but it made sense, why I did that. But ultimately, if I don't, flip the hands, complete the swing with the hands, then I have, for me, a very, very acceptable shot. So now, how to make room, how to make it more likely, that's the way I view it statistically, that you'll make room from the lower body. What I've realized now that I've been experimenting with, that I started really a while ago, but more solidified yesterday, is I'm choking way up on my driver. And so I have a Cobra Speed Zone driver. And so, it came with the standard length shaft, I believe 44 and a half inches or something like that. And, I choked up, in the middle and even a little bit lower down on the grip. And so, because I have a fairly short backswing, or what I feel is not, I don't have the fullest of shoulder turns, certainly not past 90 degrees. So with a longer club, you have to have more time, generated in your backswing, or depth. And so time can be converted to depth. And so, that was an issue. So I was like, let me just, why hit my drive with the full length? Because I can hit my 0 iron decent. I can hit my 4 iron, 5 iron, and the shorter clubs a little bit better. So I'm like, why don't I just choke up? And it just makes sense where, if I, in the backswing, if I create more time for that cue for the lower body to get engaged first, then I have a better chance of engaging the lower body first. And so that's what choking up on the driver allows a person to do. And so, just know that. And I would say for people just in general, if like mid-round, your timing is not good, which usually it's the upper body generating the swing. That's what happens usually later in the round, or we get all armsy, even with our chips. And so I would recommend just choking up, and then that might be that extra little bit of time you need for your brain to send the signal to get the lower body through first, get it moving actively, before the arms start moving actively, and then when they're just dropping, they're sort of passively moving, and then you can finish the swing and just don't flip, and then you'll be okay. So that's what I did with my driver yesterday. And the cool thing about it is that, the concept very much works. So I shortened my driver by choking up, and then, I have an extremely strong grip, and then I was always hitting these low, sort of thinny, just not very good ball flights. Sometimes, snap hooking it, like I said. So I increased the loft from 9 to 10.5. So that takes some amount of humility, because everybody thinks, oh, the lower the loft that you go, the better player you are. But not necessarily. It's actually more dependent on your grip, and obviously your backswing and how you present the club to the ball. And so, I would be presenting it very, very de-lofted, hitting down, because again, I was coming down like that on the ball because my swing was almost all top down. And so, I was like de-lofting an already low lofted driver. So that's just my default. I just have to be aware of the fact that that's what it is, because I have a strong grip, which puts me at a de-loft situation. I have a shorter backswing with a quick transition. Those are my issues that will probably never go away. And so that's just what I'm working with. And so I have no business being at like 9, 8 or anything lower, of course. And so I was like, let me go to now the thing with 10.5, it actually closes the face a little bit. And so I'm looking down at a club face that looks slightly closed, but it has more loft. And so I was like, well, I really like the open, the more loft, but I don't really like the closed face. But the thing that I realize now is that the closed face actually helps, and then so, because again, now another cool thing is too, this Cobra driver that I have, the club head is much heavier. And so even though it feels not as good as my Maverick, but it's actually better for me because it forces me to swing a little bit easier, because the club literally feels heavier. And so as long as my arms and stuff are relaxed, it'll actually shallow a little bit better. And I've been noticing that. And so instead of the tendency to drive by the shoulder, I actually hit more cuts now, and so the club is coming in a little bit better, better impact. And so my tendency now is to hit more cuts. And the bigger cut that I hit is when the hips are moving less. Okay, so if my hips open a little bit, clear a little bit, then I hit kind of a squeeze cut. If they open quite a bit, then I tend to hit it straight. And so, or with a little bit of a draw. And then again, if I flip my hands, then it snap hooks. But that still can happen. But, now it's more just dependent on how much my hips move. And so I'm hitting a bit of a cut. So anyway, the closed face is okay, is what I'm saying. It's fine. And so that's my setup now, And so another cool thing too is it allows me to stand closer to the ball, because I feel like I've always been sort of hunched down and all that. So I stand a bit closer and I can stand more upright when I'm choking up. It's more like an iron, basically. And so this has all been good, and so initially I didn't think it was like an issue or whatever. It's like, no, it's more my swing. But when you just think about the physics, like, it makes a lot of sense, and so now my feels with the driver are just making sure I make a full turn, with my shoulder. And then the same principles that I implement with my irons, just a slow transition. But the key thing that I realize now that I have to do, because I have such a huge tendency with my driver to be all arms, because I try and do everything with the upper body and just get the swing over with. I think that it's more powerful when it's not, is I have to tell myself in the backswing to get the hips going. And I almost can't do it fast enough. And so that's really what my swing thought has to be now, is, choke up on it, and then make sure I get a good turn, hold it, and then send the message to the lower body to lead the way. And then, the arms follow suit. And then that's pretty much it, and then I wasn't losing any distance at all. And, I did hit one poor, like my old ones, like a snap hook. But aside from that one yesterday, I hit a lot of like good ones, and then they were plenty long, like 280, 290, 300 and all that. So it's no issue. So choking up and then adding 1.5 degrees of loft, increased my yardage. And so most importantly, my consistency, because again, it was competing with like snap hooks. So if you're competing against snap hooks, I can beat a snap hook with my driver with like, I don't know, like a 6 iron or 7 iron or something like that. It doesn't go very far. So it's a low bar, fair enough. But, I was like, again, these videos that I watch with TXG and all these other people on YouTube, somebody even cut it down to 40 inches and they're still hitting their driver. It's like the length off the shelf is 99% not good for you, you know? And so you have to look at your swing. And so the reason I recommend people to choke up is that now you have two clubs. You have a quote unquote fairway finder by choking up. And then if you're playing in like a scramble or something and you're the last person, you just open up on it. Yeah, go to the end, you know, and then, but just make sure that just because you're at the end, you don't swing faster, you actually swing even more sort of methodically. Okay, let the club take that extra bit for you. So you don't swing faster. Like of anything, if you go, whatever your swing thought your speed was with the choked up version, more like an iron swing, you know, more of like a fairway finder mindset, you continue that. You know, it's just you now grip to the end and then you stand, you know, proportionally, you know, properly with the longer club, and then same thought, you know, because the extra little bit you're going to get a little bit from it, but assuming you hit it the same. So that's pretty much it. So you effectively have two clubs now, and so that's good. But again, from the numbers, if you grip to the, you know, an inch down or two, it's not going to change your yardage by that much. But you know, again, it gives you that potential, you know, and then now with these drivers, you can change the loft. So if you master, like what I'm planning to do, try and master the gripping up with, you know, the 10.5 degrees, then eventually you can maybe knock it to 9 degrees, you know, once you get your, you know, your lower body always clearing first. And then you can get away with lower loft, because then you're presenting a club head that's not as descending. So that's the key thing, you know, and so it makes sense, you know, just in general, like, first of all, if you have any kind of club, whether it be a wedge or anything, and then your downswing is started by, you know, your shoulders going towards the ball, that's not going to work, you know, ever. But it kind of just shows that you can create an environment where you have better chance, you know, and so that's what choking up and then increasing the loft did for me, I believe. And so I'm going to continue to experiment with this, but you know, I'm playing again today and I'm going to try the same thing. And so the thing that I want, that I've always told myself that has helped me, is to keep my head behind the ball. But I've realized that, and I always wonder, like, why am I not doing that? Okay, I was like, what's triggering me to not keep my head behind the ball long enough for my driver? And the reality is, it's because my hips are not moving. Because if you're set up, our body just in general, like, we'll only move if we need to move, you know, our position, if there's like a reason for it. And so if I set up with my shoulders to elevate, tilted, you know, up, and then my head set behind the ball, and then it's only going to move if like there's a reason for it. So if I'm swinging and then my upper body starts the downswing, then my head's moving towards the ball. And so either it'll continue that route or it'll try and pull out, and then I'll hit a lot thin, which is what I do a lot. But the lower body is only engaged very, very little. But in the backswing, if my lower body is engaging where I grab the ground and then twist, then the club will come in on a shallow path, and then it's on a longer journey, so to speak, to the ball. So it'll have more speed, and then come in at the correct angle of attack. So that's very, very important, you know. And so that's really should be my focus in the backswing, is that get the full shoulder turn, really feel it, and then appreciate it. And then, you know, just think ground up, you know, at that point. And just really, for me, it's like, get the belt buckle going to the target. And so that's like my trigger. Let it go, you know, and then don't stop it. Because if it stops and stalls, you can have issues there where, you know, you'll still get stuck. And so you'll have better shots than if you didn't trigger the lower body first. But, you know, just, it's going to feel like it's constantly rotating, even if it's like stops for a moment at impact. But, you know, just keep it going, you know. And then so I believe the hips actually technically do sort of stall at impact, and then the momentum of the arms finishes the swing. But, you know, I can't prove that like biomechanically, but I have a feeling that that's kind of the way that the swing works. It's like it kind of braces for impact, so to speak. And then all the momentum that was built already finishes it. And so that's probably truly what's going on. But again, in my mind, it's just the belt buckle needs to get to the target eventually. And so it's more just the concept that the arms and the club head are trailing behind, you know. And so the more I believe you can sync those two up, the faster you can hit the ball, or the harder you can hit the ball with faster ball speed. And so You don't want the hips way ahead and then the arms trailing way behind. You'll lose power and accuracy that way, but ultimately that's what it becomes. It's like a synchronization thing, and then the better people do it, the more powerful, you can apply that power to the ball. So that's the deal, and so I would just recommend people, don't get stuck on these like longer drivers or whatever. Like the people on tour, they won't even notice. Like if you give them two drivers of different lengths, like, they'll obviously they can feel it a little bit, but they're not going to be able to look at a golf club and be like, oh, that's 45.5 inches or 47 or whatever. Like that's all they do. Their brain has like already optimized. You can put a wedge in their hand and then they'll flush it. Then you'll put a 5-iron in their hand and they'll flush that. And you put a 3-iron or whatever, they'll just keep hitting them square. And so, because their brain knows, it's calibrated. And so for us, like, we don't hit as many balls as they do and that kind of thing. So, it's, and even if you do it doesn't hurt, to like, they're always going to hit the shorter clubs much more square because there's less risk involved, and then there's less movement that's necessary is a better way to put it, to square up the face. To square up the wedge, you don't really need to move your hips that much, like I said. But as you hit longer and longer clubs, you need more and more room. And so, first of all, you do have to make room from the ground up, and then you have to make more room for the club to come through. And so that's it becomes more and more important. But they have no issues, hitting the club square as it gets shorter and shorter, and still for us it's still a challenge, but it makes it a lot more likely, that we'll do that. And so the cool thing for me is that I started hitting the ball high again. And I don't think it was really so much because of the 10.5 degrees lofting. And I think that that's a practical thing that helps for now. I don't think I need to keep that forever. It's just, choking up because I'm not that deep in the backswing. I can get quick with the downswing. So it gives me that extra little bit, even if it's like a nanosecond, to get the hips going, because if they never go, then it's going to be terrible. But it's like a little bit of extra time, a little cushion to allow the hips to do what they need to. And then even if they're playing catch up, so to speak, it's better than not engaging them at all. Because then if they do catch up a bit late, I'll hit squeeze cuts, which are playable for me. And so most times, but if they never do anything, then you come out and then you just hit these garbage shots. And so it doesn't matter. There's nothing you can do to fix that. But whether you have a long shaft or short one or like a putter, it doesn't matter. It's just going to be trash. So that's the concepts for me. And so it's the idea of making room, and then we always want to make room for the arms from the ground up. So it involves less of the arms, which is the counterintuitive thing for us, because we, a lot of times, especially people who play like racket sports, I played hockey and stuff, like you want to do everything with the arms, baseball or whatever. So golf is different in that sense, in that, it's, you have to engage with the ground, very much so. And so I think now people get into these kind of things, you realize that all those other sports are doing that. It's just, when we're watching it, we think it's their arms, but it is a mostly interaction with the ground. First and foremost, that's creating the space for the arms to finish the task, which is ultimately what they're doing. And then the hands can screw it up. That's the way I think about it. Let the arms finish it and don't let the hands screw it up by flipping or whatever. It's like the hands should stay very mute in the golf swing, and they're the last thing to get the signal. It's like, okay, you hit, preserve your angles, and then you release the hands after. So you don't want a handsy swing, which sometimes it's a strong grip sort of implies, but we fight that. We can live with that. I just cannot grip the club with a neutral grip. I just can't with a left-handed. The irony is that when I swing right-handed, it's a neutral grip. So it's just the way that our hands are wired and then grab onto things. So I'm stuck with a strong grip, and it looks like I'm kind of stuck with the amount that I get of shoulder turn. It's just the amount that I can turn. And so that's okay, and so that's the way, unless you can change that, over time and get into like flexibility and stuff, which people should do, I guess. But I'm not in that point. I'm too lazy to do that. So I have to, with what I'm working with, the tendency to have too short of a backswing and then a quick backswing, it makes a lot of sense to hit a shorter driver. And so, eventually if I get to that point where I do that all the time, and then I never, have a superficial turn, I never get quick, rarely get quick, then I could start creeping back up maybe to the full length. But I would actually probably first, if I'm going to adjust anything, is keep the choked up situation, keep the loft even at 10.5. Or sorry, I would adjust the loft first, before I start, changing anything else. And so stick with the choked up situation. It won't hurt me. And so then I'll get a little bit extra if I'm presenting the club not as steep with the lower body leading the downswing, a more shallower approach, angle of attack, then I'll knock the 10.5 back to 9. And then the ball flight may come out a bit lower, but probably not noticeably, and then I'll get a little bit more ball speed. I'll also increase dispersion, so I may not want to do that. But that's what I would start with, if I'm going to revert back to anything, is start with the loft first. And, I don't think it makes sense, to, for most people, and I'm like a 2 or 3 handicap golfer, and so I'm not like a bad player, to just take a driver off the rack and start swinging at it. It doesn't make sense. And so especially if you're the person out there who hits their irons really well, and then your driver is kind of iffy, like very, very, very iffy. And so to the point where there was a time where I would hit 10 drivers and I didn't even know where like maybe one or two would be okay because my swing was entirely from the top down. And so you just cannot fix that. It's like sometimes if you're very handsy, you can just quiet the hands and then you hit a decent shot. You can actually sort of work with that if you're doing a lot of other things right. But if you start your downswing like I normally do, short and then quick, you can't fix that. So I'm definitely working on that. And then I've identified that as the problem. And then what are some things that can help? And I have a feeling that this is going to be like permanent help, because there's no, let's just say even that choking all the way or all the way to the top of the club gave me, let's say, consistently 10 or 15 or 20 yards. I don't need those for the amount that, like the golf courses that I play. And so I don't need that. I'm not trying to reach like 600-yard par 5s and 2 or anything like that. But the cool thing about it is that if I can keep my driver like this, where yesterday I hit one very, very poorly, and then the rest were like in play. I could work with them. One of them was a cut that like I hit a tree and actually came back into the fairway and was very playable. And then the rest, like another 3 or 4 were like long and straight. And so, it was good, and so like 280 to 300 and a little bit, more on a couple. So, it was like plenty. So this is kind of the way it is with me. Either they're really, really good or they're like trash. And so the nice thing about it is I have like a bit of a middle ground now, which is like a squeeze cut when I don't clear my hips enough. So, which is fine, which is the way I want it to be. I just don't want those trash shots to be like pretty much every shot. So yesterday I got it down to like 1, just total garbage. And so I had to like pitch it, chip it forward and then I, make bogey that way. But it didn't like happen regularly, or I didn't stand over the ball and think that that's going to be the likely outcome. And so that's a great thing, and so I'm just working on right now a very, very slow, almost boring, methodical backswing with my driver, feeling the top and then telling the hips to go. And then that's it, that's all I can control and want to control and think about. And then, and just really, I would say that the thought should be is just enjoy the ball flight, because if the ball is going up, for me, usually it's a good shot. If the ball is high, like I can't do it unless it's like a good strike. And so that's all my focus should be, is actually the ball flight, not hitting the ball very, very hard or anything like that. So once a person does do that consistently, then they know that the sequence that's supposed to happen. Then if you want, you can clear faster and swing your arms faster if you want, but it's always clear faster first and faster. And so then you can start revving that up if you want, take a bit on and off. But if you don't have that sequence, that understanding that you make room for the arms from the ground up, then it doesn't matter how hard or slow you swing your arms. It's actually better in both situations to just swing your arms at a more moderate rate, because Then if you hit it poorly, it won't be as poorly. It won't be as spinny. And then if you do hit it well, you'll notice that you don't really lose that much distance because you're swinging it the amount that you should. You're moving your arms as quickly as you should in all situations. So that's been an eye-opening thing for me. But, you know, I would just highly recommend people to, for people out there who hit their irons really well, and then they just hit their driver or even their 3-wood or any of these woods like trash, it's very likely that what I'm saying is part of the problem, you know, at least is that when we have these longer clubs with this bigger heads and all that, we have this mindset of like revving up, like we're supposed to hit them really hard or whatever. And then we tend to do that with our arms, with our upper body. And so, you know, and then what I've realized now is that my head staying back and making that a conscious thought does help. It certainly does. But the only way that it will stay back for long enough is if the lower body is engaged first. Because if the upper body gets engaged first, then the head goes towards the ball and can't stay back with the driver and potentially stay back even further. And so the more I essentially engage my hips and then keep my head back and maybe even further back, those are going to be the best shots. And so you'll notice when the pros are trying to hit it really, really hard, they tend to fall backwards because they're trying to get even more leverage up from the ground. And so, but they're going to fall backwards, not forward or, you know, towards the ball. They fall that way. And so basically that becomes the way, if you want to generate more power, is that you clear the hips using the ground forces to make room quicker, you know, to allow room for your arms, which are going to be coming through faster. And then you hang back even more, even longer. And so you may even have to move your head even further back. And so to hit even more potentially up on it with more speed. And so that's what you'll notice. That's the way, if you want a person to generate more and more power, that's what you should see as a result. Not like a person flinging their arms and flying all over the place and all that kind of stuff. You should, of anything, see us go back, hang back on it, you know, a bit longer. And so, you know, the hips clearing and the head staying put or moving back are basically the two fundamentals. To summarize this video, fundamentals of a good driver. And then, you know, the shorter driver shaft, what I realized actually helps enable those two things. Hope everyone's doing well.